Hello, and welcome to the Regrettable Century. Today, it's Jason, Chris, Ben, Daniel, and Mir. Okay, today, real romantic anti-capitalism hours. We are reading Laudato Si, also known as Care for Our Common Home, which is an encyclical by Pope Francis. And it is the version that was put out by Verso Books, which is how I originally got the idea to read it, because I've always kind of wanted to read it because it's definitely the most anti-capitalist thing a pope has written in quite some time. Plus, it's radically environmentalist. I saw Amir kind of like run through his mental register real quick. He's like, is this an accurate statement?
Luckily, we have Mir to fact check every single thing that we say about this.
No, definitely. Yeah, absolutely.
Also, can I just say that I made a joke to Ben that I just find it funny for some reason that there's like a Verso edition.
Yeah, it's absolutely funny.
Because all of the encyclicals are on the Vatican website for free.
They are.
Just go there.
Yeah.
Like,
I have the Vatican edition.
Of course you do. But I went and I was like, I'm going to download the Verso. You have to like pay for it, but it's free.
Yeah, you download it and it's like when you check out, you complete the purchase and it's $0.
Yeah.
I was like, whatever. But I just wanted the Verso version of it. I wish they did a print version. I'd actually pay money for that. But
they did.
Yeah. Did they do a print version? I only saw the PDF version.
No, I remember when they published it at the bookstore I was working at.
Oh, okay. Cool. I didn't know about that.
It's like a pamphlet,
Yeah, when you read it, you can see why Verso decided to put it out.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Because it is, if nothing else, radically, romantically anti-capitalist and very, very Catholic.
Absolutely. Should we start with because I don't think all the people who are listening know exactly what an encyclical is.
Sure, yeah, actually, go for it, right? Give us a rundown.
Yeah, an encyclical is an official papal teaching document. So most popes write a couple of them. They vary in length. Historically, they have usually just been 1 or 2 pages. This is a proper book.
Yeah.
They are not infallible. The Pope can make infallible statements. It has happened twice the last 50 years or something like that. But it's not infallible, but it's still a part of the official church teaching. This specific encyclical is numerically Pope Francis' second encyclical. The first one he didn't write. The first one was basically he just put his name to Pope Benedict XVI's last encyclical, which weren't published. It should also be mentioned that Pope Francis, of course, he didn't write this himself. We know who wrote it. It is Emmanuel Fernandez, who is today prefect of the Dicastery of Faith, which is basically the old Inquisition.
Yeah, that's what Pope Benedict was the head of, directly before becoming Pope.
Exactly. So this is Pope Francis' first encyclical. This was within Catholic circles not as controversial as one might think.
Right.
Also, I mean, the right wing in the US went haywire, but they always do. But if you look at right-wing Catholics in France, in Italy, in Britain, they were surprisingly fine with it. The big break with Pope Francis from the more conservative side of the church came 2 or 3 years after this. And
right.
encyclical. So that's all.
There's nothing in this that doesn't just jive with Catholic social teaching in general. The big difference is that it emphasizes the sort of just inherent collectivism and inherent environmentalism of Catholic social teaching. And, for Americans and Catholics in the United States who are conservative Catholics in the United States are basically just Protestants and have a problem with collectivism. And, even though this encyclical does uphold the right of people to hold, it says private property, but the way I read it, it's personal property. That's not enough for American conservative Catholics, right? You have to, they would like an encyclical that's written all about how private property is sacred. It's like the eighth sacrament, basically.
Yeah, like when it comes to conservative Catholics in the U.S., Catholic social teaching is be a nice person. That's it.
Right.
It's to be charitable is an obligation of Christianity. But if you have any more to say about it than just be kind and tithe, whatever. Basically, yes, Protestantism.
Yeah.
But if it's any more than that, then it's secret Marxist creeping doctrine inside of the church. It just so happens that all of the popes have been a part of the secret creeping Marxist. A lot of right-wing Catholics in the U.S. are Protestant about the Pope, and not the concept of the Pope, but just whoever the living Pope is. That one's no good.
Yeah.
Well, that's because they're wholly invested in abstractions. All of these kindness, or even salvation, or the papacy, they cannot be things that have application to the material world, which is what this entire encyclical is directed at. What does it mean to apply Scripture to our faith as a praxis among all people, all creatures, and the earth? What you were saying earlier about private property, the right wing of the Catholic Church, in line with the Protestants, they're basically wanting an intervention into Catholic social teaching and into Christian doctrine that rescues private property. He does the in the second chapter we'll get to. I was reminded he quotes the earth is the Lord's. Psalm 24:1. To him belongs the earth with all that is within it. Deuteronomy 10:14. Thus God rejects every claim to absolute ownership. The land shall not be sold in perpetuity, for the land is mine. For you are strangers and sojourners with me. Leviticus 25:23. So there's this incipient communism always underlying the absolute nature of God.
Absolutely. I would say that when we say that this encyclical isn't innovative or doesn't add a whole lot, I think that's partially correct. I would say that there are two main differences between this and classical Catholic tradition that we can get out of the way. The first is it qualifies private property a lot more than has previously been done. It has previously been done, especially in relationship to labor. That was the first social encyclical, Rerum Novarum, in the late 20th century, I think.
Pope Leo XIII, our current Pope's most his biggest influence. I think that's what he would say.
Exactly.
1891.
Thank you. So it qualifies private property a lot more negatively than has been done in a long time. The second is a matter of tradition also. While the Vatican has, for the last 200 or 300 years, primarily dealt in the Thomist tradition of Thomas Aquinas, and here Francis draw a lot more on another scholastic tradition of Bonaventure, which is more the Platonic personalist tradition. And that is nothing completely new, but it is a major shift in emphasis away from the Thomist tradition to a more, I would say, Platonist mystical theology rather than the Aristotelian Thomist that we are used to.
Yeah, there's
Right.
a huge emphasis on the relational aspect of how everything sort of finds its balance in relation to each other part. And there's no, I don't know, maybe this is an interesting question, but there doesn't seem to be as much of a hierarchy of sort of being.
Right.
It's been, so I will say that I read this when it came out 10 years ago. I was in a very different context and world then. I was not yet a Marxist, but I was an anti-capitalist. So it was a super interesting document. And I didn't have time to reread it all this time. I just kind of skimmed a few parts. But this it's quite interesting what he's saying about the sort of place of humankind. Like he's reacting against this sort of misinterpretation he calls of dominion over nature,
Right.
seeing nature as this separate object that we consume, and technology plays a huge role in this that I hope we'll talk about. But he emphasizes this, like, humanity maybe isn't actually the most important. I mean, he does say that human nature is kind of unique in all these various ways, but that we are one among many creatures and we are part of this whole creation, which is such an interesting emphasis, I think, because to me, it's like, even the phrase Laudato Si, it's almost this humble humility, this stance of humility in the face of all of this holistic creation. And it doesn't sort of single out one piece over the other. It's saying that this is a web of interconnectedness, which is, it makes me think of sort of modern science. And even, I mean, it's funny that, and not in this encyclical, but in the second one, or the third one, I think, he cites Donna Haraway, who's this like sort of postmodernist science author who's famous for the Cyborg Manifesto. But her whole thing is like, it's kind of, her whole thing is about symbiosis, and that there's this mutuality of thinking about science and being in relation to, creatures are no element of like nature is separate or cordoned off. It's all in the symbiotic relationship. And it's so interesting to see that he's obviously drawing on some of these thinkers, and he's putting this out there, which also feels kind of new in this discourse.
Yeah.
But the newness he's bringing up by way of mapping out his genealogy to other popes and what they have said in the introduction.
Yeah.
He says, "We have forgotten that man is not only a freedom which he creates for himself. Man does not create himself. He is spirit and will, but also nature." And then he goes on to quote Pope Benedict. So it's like he's drawing from all sides within the Catholic tradition, shoring up the argument that he's going to make.
Just to tag on the thought that I had, that it really just emphasizes the dignity of all the parts, right? It's like,
right.
It's sort of like no one of the parts has any inherent right to sort of have dominion over the others. The whole thing has this elevated dignity. Right. And it's like precisely because of this relational aspect that is true. And it's the whole narrative, he says, where it's like when we lose sight of that is when all these, I love the way he talks about it. It's like the social and environmental are like two sides of the same problem.
Right.
Because it's like it's lost sight of this. As soon as you lose sight of the dignity and respect of everything that's around you is when you think it's okay to, frack or treat your workers poorly, right? It's all like the same part of the same piece.
Right.
Pope Francis on metabolic rift.
Yeah.
No, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ben, you were talking about how He's drawing on his predecessors, and that this is not like just from the mind of Pope Francis and Karl Marx in the way that a lot of people will see it, or a lot of people have seen it, whatever. But he's like re-emphasizing not just Catholic social teaching, but church teaching going back far, like all the way back, And I was just thinking about how earlier what I was saying about the specific right-wing Catholics in the United States, and about how we really should take a moment to just be like extremely appreciative of the fact that Pope Leo is from Chicago.
Yeah,
It's like,
Right.
okay, because maybe American Catholics will pay a little bit more attention to an American Pope who happens to also have taken his name from Leo XIII, who his encyclical is about industrialization and dehumanization.
right.
So
Right.
drawing from the past and holding it together tradition and carrying it forward, especially as an American, really should do more to undermine the right-wing pseudo-Protestant theology of Catholics in the U.S. more than some guys on a podcast.
You mean the woke Marxist Pope?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and like to put it back to our new Pope, he was an Augustinian
Right.
monk before, and I don't think he quotes Saint Augustine in this, but one of the things that he does in this encyclical is to present us with a sort of Christian dialectics.
Yeah.
Dialectics of creation, and his notion of human relations and the relationship to God is verbatim taken from Saint Augustine.
So Pope Francis wrote a better Dialectics of Nature than Frederick Engels.
Absolutely. Well, like I think also.
That's heresy.
Well, I think it's also important before we jump into the text to qualify what this text is not. It's not meant to be a text of social, like a theoretical text, like the Marxist tradition is used to, who explains stuff.
Right.
The goal of the social teaching of the church is to help the people of the church to become saints.
Right.
And that is very important when we approach this text and church text. Like, these are texts that is supposed to be lived and help the person to holiness. It is not meant as an intellectual exercise, which I believe will make a lot of persons from the left tradition who approach these texts a bit confused as well.
Yeah, I think so. Like, there's a part where he says something about that the church is to like a sponsored dialogue between different factions in society to come up with solutions, and that's very much the opposite of what I think a lot of people are looking for whenever they download a free book from Verso. They're like, wait, this does not say what we're supposed to do. But also that happens to be a criticism that we've gotten on our podcast, and so
Yes.
in keeping with that tradition, here you go.
Yeah.
Well, Mir, before you say, I just wanted to pause it. So we've been talking about what it is and is not, and you just mentioned the purpose to foster the people. Terrible band. Sorry for using those words. But he intentionally is directing this ecumenically to the world. We need a conversation which includes everyone. He addresses this as he enters into the second chapter, which is all about faith, and explains why people outside of faith should take it seriously and so forth. So is this a new step in encyclicals?
Yes and no. Up until I think it was John the 23rd, who was the first pope who wrote an encyclical who wasn't just for the Catholic Church.
Okay.
And that was an encyclical who dealt with nuclear war. Like, because his point was that nuclear war is an existential threat, so I am dedicating this not only to the Christians, but to all persons of goodwill. Pope Francis take this a bit further.
Right.
And he addressed it not only to the people of goodwill, but to all of mankind.
Even the people of bad will.
Exactly. He's quite explicit about that.
Right.
Yeah.
So that is the first encyclical who has done that third leap. And it was just in our last century that an encyclical was addressed to people outside of the Catholic Church.
I was talking with Daniel yesterday when I was trying to get him to come on with us, and we were talking about Rerum Novarum as this touchstone of Catholic social teaching that is responding to the ills of industrial capitalism, but at the same time to the response from socialism and labor to that. So that's this sort of tension inside of Catholic social teaching from Rerum Novarum. And this is a very different kind of position as opposed to responding to this sort of immoral, unchristian despoiling of the earth and humanity from Rerum Novarum. On page 31 of the Verso, as a matter of fact, he says in number 25 that capitalism is a global problem with grave implications. It's just like the reality. It's not an ideological position. It's like, this is what is going to take us over the cliff.
Absolutely. And that is not anything new. Like, both the most conservative, politically conservative Pope, I think, in the last 400 years was probably John Paul II, also said that, capitalism is not copacetic with the Catholic social teaching.
Yeah.
And that is also stated in Rerum Novarum.
Right.
So that is not anything new.
Rerum Novarum is also where he puts forward like a sort of not structured, but really puts forward the idea of distributism, right? Like Catholic corporatist sort of social organization.
Yeah. And the Rerum Novarum is basically the first official document of Catholic social teaching.
Yeah.
And that confounds the whole sort of left-right binary that we're all used to in modernity.
Well, it pre-exists it by thousands of years.
Yes, exactly. I mean, Catholicism, you see Catholicism coming out against capitalism before capitalism proper ever existed.
Right.
You know, you've got the ban on usury, the ban on the marketplaces being open on feast days, the ban on doing business where an exorbitant profit is made. You know, you're not supposed to make more than you need to be able to sustain yourself and your family. So you should always sell goods at only a slightly marked up price to cover your own labor, stuff like that. I mean, Catholicism has been against capitalism since capitalism was like forming in the medieval market.
There's the line in the Communist Manifesto about, even Marx complains, like, it's like with capitalism, it's just naked exploitation. Like, at least it was like couched with other human like clothing beforehand, right? Exploitation. Now it's just, and I think that's part of the kind of the source of a lot of these criticisms stems from this, as we were mentioning before, this kind of personalist or humanist viewpoint, which is that to sort of put economics or monetary gain as the highest good, you lose out on this holistic view of who are we actually and where are we going and what is actually good for us. So this, that's what I see too in this encyclical, is half of it is reminding us like there's actually more, there's better things, like this moral and ethical teaching that, again, the dignity of not just the human person, but the non-human worlds, animals, plants, the earth itself so interesting how he's almost mirroring like the Gaia hypothesis, right? It's
Yeah.
Yeah.
and early on, like Earth is mother. It's a being almost who's
Yeah.
responding to these things that are being done to her.
Very
But-
Franciscan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the personification of like nature, you know, the way like Francis did that often. Saint
Yes.
Francis did that.
But I also like that he talks about our sister, Mother Earth.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
our humanity's relationship to the earth is not the same as humanity's relationship to God,
right.
which is important. You know, it's not. This is not like a watering down of a New Age Catholicism.
Right.
It's a reminder of what it means that when when we see ourselves as part of creation, we have relatives in creation, like the other beasts, the very planet which we all live on. That nature is a sibling. That nature is full of siblings of ours. We are all children of God.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's there's like the popular misconception of the idea of like Francis as being this in harmony with nature. That's not the misconception, but it's like it gets, like you were saying, maybe this new age, like really watered down, sort of like we all live in happy harmony together. And I don't think that's the vision of Francis originally or Pope Francis. It's right. It's like this much more sort of cosmic balance. I mean, it really does make me think of the metabolic rift Marxist of it's like there's this, again, this symbiosis, this mutual relationship, and that is not this sort of saccharine, like a little cute picture of Francis with the birds, and we have our little fountain in our yard, which is totally fine, but
My grandmother had one.
yeah.
In this encyclical, Francis also pushes back quite hard against like this new age vision of Mother Gaia and so on. He stresses that the Judean Christian legacy was always about demystifying our relationship with nature, that nature isn't God. And because nature isn't God, because nature is created, just as humanity is created, nature is also vulnerable.
Right.
And because of its vulnerability, humanity has a special relationship to care for the vulnerable, and that wouldn't make sense if creation itself was godlike, because the godlike cannot die. So there is a real push and pull between the metaphors here as well. But that's something that appears later. Should we jump straight into the text proper to give it a bit more structure?
Sure. Yeah, I was looking at a bit on 38 that was resonating with me around what you've been saying about vulnerability. It isn't the extent of nature's vulnerability is that it is eventually irretrievable. We can go beyond the point of no return. And he says, we seem to think that we can substitute an irreplaceable and irretrievable beauty with something which we have created ourselves. And this is part of the theme of the document, which is that we have presumed the place of creator, of God, which is to say destroyer. We create destruction as though, it's the way that we in the Southwest, where there's no plan B for water besides depleting the water table and the rivers. This is sort of like progress is just drinking the earth dry. And for Pope Francis, this comes from the sin of stepping into God's role. But, we can also read that metaphorically if we want.
Well, yes, and I think for Francis and for me, the most, like, what he wants to do in this encyclical is very much stated in paragraph 2 of the introduction,
Okay.
where he speaks about our own broken relationship, that we are all fallen people and sinful people, and that spreads until nature. The violence present in our heart, wounded by sin, is also reflected in the symptoms of sickness evident in the soil, in the water, in the air, and in all forms of life. The earth herself is among the most abandoned and maltreated of our poor. We have forgotten that we ourselves are dust of the earth. For me, that is very much at the heart of what he wants to communicate. Like that our own way of relating to the world, to our neighbors, to God, overflows to the rest of creation. And if we are trapped in a way of viewing the world as pure instrument for our own satisfaction, and not to treat the world as a gift, and that makes us maltreat nature. So basically, nature here, our relationship with nature, with the environment, becomes a reflection, an externalization of our relationship with ourselves, with our neighbor, and with God. And if any of those relationships are broken, our relationship with nature is broken. And if our relationship with nature is broken, we will destroy nature.
Right. Metabolic rift again.
Exactly.
Yeah. And far be it for me to editorialize and to add to what any pope should have said, or what I think should. But he could have pointed to any number of verses in the Bible about the concept of stewardship.
Right.
And like in Leviticus 19:9 through 10, it says, "When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap your field right up to its edge. Neither shall you gather the gleanings after your harvest. And you shall not strip your vineyard bare. Neither shall you gather the fallen grapes of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and for the sojourner." Leviticus, that's pretty close to the beginning. That's right away. And also there are verses in Genesis, but they go through Proverbs. You can find them in the New Testament. They're everywhere, all throughout. This concept of stewardship, that the capitalist mindset about the natural world is in fact anathema. It's runs entirely counter, even devoid of questions of private property. Just seeing the creation as only in terms of its exchange value rather than its use value.
Yeah, and as Mir was saying earlier, that comes from a misinterpretation of the very concept of dominion, which is actually, according to the church, stewardship is something that requires regeneration and not just rule.
Well, like in classical in classical Christian theology, there are three modes of relating to creation. Dominion, which has never really been a part of the Catholic tradition. Like that really takes hold of the Christian imagination with Martin Luther and his notion of the demystified world.
Right.
And also in Calvin and in Protestantism. Then we have two other. We have the stewardship model of creation, where we help creation and treat creation as an artwork, which we together with God create. That's the stewardship model. And then we have the kinship model, where we are siblings of creation. And in this encyclical, Pope Francis rejects the dominion model right out of hand, and he vacillates between kinship and stewardship model very much. He doesn't come down on either side or he comes down on both sides in separate parts of this
Right.
encyclical. But that's the theological history behind this. So that's how he starts the encyclical, "Whet the violence presence in our heart."
And between kinship and stewardship, we are our brother's keeper.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
I love that. That's exactly right. Do we think it's every single word of this encyclical is kind of great? It's actually been it was kind of like when we were talking about being responsible for different chapters. It was like, I'll take chapter 1, and then my notes are just shorthand versions of what's in the text, and I circled a few things I thought were really good, and I'm wondering if maybe do we want to just like read through this like we did with like we've done in the past with things like the Hegel article we just did, or does that mean that this is a very long?
Yeah. No, this would be like a 10-part series if we did that.
Like the audiobook version of this is 7 hours.
Okay, that's good.
4 or 7 hours, I can't remember, but something like that.
Yeah, more than 1 hour. So.
Way more. But what we can do is like go through each subchapter.
Okay, I'm more comfortable doing that than saying these are the most important things.
Yeah.
Like I would rather we all just kind of did that. If everyone's okay with that, I think Mary's probably right on.
Sorry, I missed that because Brittany was texting me about something.
Oh, we were talking about the X-Files movies. Yeah, the first one's really good. It's like a Monster of the Week episode, but turned into a movie.
Yeah,
it was really good. What are you talking about?
Well, I mean, it's like a Monster of the Week episode. Those are good too, but
those are good.
Not quite the same as the first movie. No, we were talking about well, actually, Amir, could you recap?
Yeah, like like that, to give this structure, but also to give justice to this rich and complex document, we should go through each subchapter.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, the way that I have it set, like I have all my notes, is just conceptual. I have conceptual bullet points that I could just read, and then we'll draw it out. But that's not till chapter 3. So
same here, but I have done it for all chapters, and it's like 20 pages or something like that.
Yeah, I've got 4 pages of notes.
Well,
3 pages.
Okay, so I would say that we have dealt with paragraph 1 and 2, and now we're getting into nothing in this world is indifferent to us.
Right.
I love that statement. Like I want that. If I was the kind of person who would just get like a tattoo of just text, that's what I would get. I love that.
Oh yeah, like little like single line like cursive script, real like 2011. I listened to the Decembrists kind of tattoo,
Yeah, if I was one of those people, I would get nothing in this world is indifferent to us on one side, and the other side I would get nothing human is alien to me.
Yeah.
Ooh, nice.
And like
very nice.
Splendid. Paragraph 3, I already talked about in the introduction. That's the part of to all people of goodwill, that this is something new, but not something completely new.
Enter into dialogue with all people about our common home.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Also the people of bad will.
Yeah. Right.
Can we just pause really quick on, since we're picking out words, just the word common home. I don't know if we've just specifically said that. I think is just such a great encapsulation of it's that phrase, on care for our common home, just says so much by itself. And obviously ties into a lot of the things we've already spoken about, but it really does capture this idea of mutuality and symbiosis, if you will. But I was thinking about something I think maybe Mir was saying earlier about the most vulnerable. And to me, I think the point of that is you can point to like places that are vulnerable now, but the flip side of it is like vulnerability is in all of us. We all have our times of vulnerability. I think about this with like homelessness, like in Los Angeles, a freak natural disaster fire is what stands between you and homelessness, right? It's not anything you did right or wrong. It's luck or the bad luck of being in a certain place in a certain time. The point of that is like in our comfortability, it's easy to be like, oh, well, the vulnerable are over there and I'm here. But like, I think though, talking about this in this like common mutuality way, it's like there's a time and season for all things. Like my time of vulnerability might have happened or might be coming, and we need the mutual back and forth to be there for us. And so that's why we are responsible for providing that for people when they are vulnerable, right? And for nature itself. So it's like it really like brings everyone in with that word common, that we all are sharing this thing. We can't really divide. We can't draw easy dividing lines in the way that like, you know, rational enlightenment modernity tries to do with like, I'm a self, I'm in my house, my private property. Everything outside is like, doesn't concern me, right? It does. It's like very porous.
Yeah. Well, and if, you know, even when we think about the projects of humanity in the modern age, the projects of modernity on a social scale, there are different ways in which we could conceive of them as having different trajectories that we could have gone down. It's like on the first page of Agrarian Justice by Thomas Paine, he says, "It is a position not to be controverted that the earth in its natural uncultivated state was and ever would have continued to be the common property of the human race. In that state, every man would have been born to property. He would have been a joint life proprietor, with the rest in the property of the soil and in its natural productions, vegetable and animal." This is something that needs to be continually brought up. We didn't invent this notion that we should all share in hardships and also in times of prosperity and abundance and joy.
Right.
Our common home is a concept as old as the home itself.
Absolutely. And
it used to not need to be stated
yeah,
that this was a common home, right?
And to pick up on what Daniel said about vulnerability in relationship to our common home, like another word for the communal is Catholicism.
Right.
Actually. So and like, the idea that we have a deposit of faith, a deposit of prayers that not only goes through spatial all over the earth, but like also over the generations, that we pray for the dead and that the dead pray for us. That right now I'm a terrible sinner that cannot be bothered to pray or even believe. I struggle with whatever it is, hypothetically.
yeah,
And then other people, and that's okay, because we are in a common communion of believers where other people's prayers and faith and actions carry me when I cannot be carried. And like that is one of the main ideas of like the common deposit of faith of the church as a physical collective over time and space. And I think also that's one of the antecedents to the idea of communism. Basically that like now there are times in life when I cannot work due to illness, sickness, age, childhood, and then other people carry me. Like that's the main impulse.
From each according to their ability to each according to their need.
That's right.
And that started, well, it's debatable if it started, but like one of the antecedents is within the spiritual realm. And then the idea of communism is to incarnate this idea of faith into action, into the relationships of property. So that's the thing about vulnerability and common home. And then he goes on to quote Pope Paul VI, the tragic consequences of unchecked human activity is something that he spends sometimes talking about.
Due to ill-considered exploitation of nature, humanity runs the risk of destroying it and becoming in turn a victim of this degradation. It's very poignant.
Absolutely. But he's also talking about like not only like this is the whole Frankfurt School thing about, are we speaking about capitalism or modernity? Like this notion of instrumental reason. And I think what Pope Francis and and Pope Paul VI wants to emphasize is a critique of technical reason, like of this unless economical and technical ability are accompanied by authentic social and moral progress, they will definitely turn against man.
Yeah, like it's more than just critique of capitalism.
Yeah,
it's a critique of a whole series of things, which we could say modernity undergirds. But this is it's about a deep spiritual rot. One of the consequences is capitalism, and that is killing us. But there's more to it than just capitalism. It's also changing the way in which we understand ourselves, the way we understand everything else around us. And I think that you could say, I mean, there's a certain kind of a lefty who would say that it's romantic, reactionary even, because it does not just assume technological progress equals social progress equals somehow a betterment of whatever. It's like, actually, it's very, very just raising every alarm bell, and I appreciate it because I think it's needed.
I think of it as sort of, it definitely confounds that idea of reactionary versus progressive, because it's saying it lambasts the myth of progress, like progress for progress's sake. But at the same time, it is still steeped in a very Christian idea that undergirds the Enlightenment. And that is the idea that once you can better humanity by bettering the circumstances in which humanity is placed, right? So the Catholic teaching has always been that, building Christ's kingdom on earth is one of our jobs, not just evangelizing for after we're raptured, right? And then whatever goes on here doesn't really matter because we're all going to be gone soon anyway. That's sort of a like creeping Gnostic heresy that is very much a part of Protestantism.
That betterment you speak of, Chris, is what in the next section, when he quotes John Paul II, referred to as an authentic human ecology.
Right.
The betterment involves this relational web of life, as opposed to the way that progress has been conceived throughout modern industrial development, which has always been through destruction, through, the means is cutting out the chair from underneath us, by which we're reaching to the next feat.
It's more than that too, because have you guys ever on this podcast talked about Jacques Ellul? Or do you know him? No. He was I believe he was Calvinist, but he was a Protestant French thinker, but mid 20th century, but talked a lot about technological modernity and had kind of a Christian anarchist response to like modern Enlightenment rationality, technological modernism. But what is really useful, like he's definitely got some problems, but what's definitely useful in that kind of like project is he distinguishes technology as like a tool from this like gestalt, which he calls technique. In French, it's la technique. And it's like this compounding effect of, we're not going to get to it today, but like later in this encyclical, he talks about, it's like paragraph 106, an undifferentiated and one-dimensional paradigm right? It's like, it's not just technology as this like tool to like get something better or do something in a more efficient way. It's this like compounded thing that becomes its own ideology, right? It's like technology for technology's sake, progress for progress sake. And this is again where that line between modernity and capitalism gets really blurred, because those two things basically happen at the same time, right? Historically.
Right.
And so, you know, that's a really, I think that's a key thing that he's bringing into this as well, which is saying like, because what that basically is that we are, according to that view, we are just these cogs in this like one-dimensional paradigm. And in that case, like human, I mean, this is like the cynicism of human action doesn't matter at all, right? It's like we're already past the point of even climate change, like to do anything. And this document is like, actually, that's kind of like a lie of like being caught in this technological web forces us to think that way. And actually here's a totally alternative, ancient, right? Like we were talking earlier, this alternative, it's not just a belief, it's a practice, it's a, you know, organization and institution, but it's just another way of being in the world that has these other values that places those human values higher than just a mere technology. Because in the technological system, it's like, right, it's like the purely literally mechanized, I'm consuming this and then I'm discarding it. He has the great line, the throwaway culture.
Yeah.
Which again, I'm sorry if I'm getting ahead, but
well, but like this book is very spiral in like dialectically written. It returns to the themes and deepens them. I think you are completely correct. I think that when Pope Francis speaks of technology or the misuse of technology, he's speaking about technology in an epistemic way, like the way we view the world. And later he will contrast that to a loving gaze. And I think the best example of that is when you are at a job fair and networking, you view people as means to an end to get a job, to get a promotion, and that's the technological way of viewing the world. But then sometime you fall in love with the person, and then that experience of love, the gaze of love, changes the way you view you are looking at everything around it as well. All the experience in your life has led up to this moment, to meeting this person. And what Pope Francis is exhorting us to do is to change one episteme for another.
Right. Like the Holy Father is only seeing the world through one of Ted Kaczynski's eyes. The other eye, the other eye is still the eyes of Jesus Christ.
Exactly.
Well, what I'm interpreting from what you both of you are saying is the epistemic relationship we have to technology is one of belief and faith founded upon sand. And to carry on with the text, this authentic human ecology that John Paul II had evoked requires authentic human development based upon a moral character, which is to say, our human ability to transform reality must proceed in line with God's original gift of all that is, right? And then Benedict says the book of nature is one and indivisible. So this is like getting to, I love it when he quotes someone like Benedict, and it is just such a clarion phrase that is just incipient with communism. Like what can do this? You know, capitalism is the dissection of all that is, the gift of all that is, into individuated private property that destroys everything outside of its boundaries. What doesn't do that?
Right. It's by very nature like mean and withholding, right?
Yeah.
Like I love that. I love what Mir was saying about like the like when you fall in love with the person, it's like when you fall in love with the earth, that's why you want to save it, right?
Yeah.
That's why this sort of like really sterile technocratic solutions of like, well, yeah, we'll let the market sort of figure. It's like there's no love there.
No.
Or even if there's like we have to plant a bunch of trees to make sure we have enough of oxygen or place for the birds to land. It's like, what about and of course this is prefigured by this isn't later in chapter 1, but like, what about just the impossible to reconstruct beauty of nature that we are currently destroying? Yes, you may be able to, I don't know, facilitate some A to B, like minimum program of like, we've destroyed some things, well, we're going to put something new in its place, but we're not going to be able to create the same intricate, impossible web of beauty and wonder that was already here.
Yeah.
That God created, that we destroyed, and that we could just stop destroying. That would be the very first thing we should do.
Yeah.
Rather than coming up with solutions like, we'll cut down all the trees and plant new ones.
We'll cut down all the olive groves and we'll plant European trees over the villages and the massacred families. Speaking of falling in love with the earth.
Yep.
Sorry. I just had to say.
Like, we will build a huge, gorgeous resort.
Yeah, the Riviera.
So we're all in agreement that Israel is a demonic entity, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, 100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this fall, you mentioned falling in love with the earth, Daniel, and I'm just we don't have to skip, but I am skipping ahead briefly when he invokes Saint Francis in number 11. The poverty and austerity of St. Francis were no mere veneer of asceticism, but something much more radical, a refusal to turn reality into an object, simply to be used and controlled. And why was that? He had fallen in love with the earth, with God in every instantiation of the world.
Honestly, Ben, skipping ahead, like just jumping ahead, is probably good because Daniel, you have like 5 minutes. See if we can get through the introduction.
Yeah.
So we're at Saint Francis of Assisi.
Yes, exactly. And like for Francis of Assisi, it is important that the love of nature is interconnected with the love of God. Like, you cannot love one without the other. To take it back to a quite profane example of two persons falling in love with each other. Like if you have a wife or a husband or a girlfriend or whatever, and that person gifts you something, a piece of art and craft that person has made for you, that object becomes imbued with the meaning of that person.
Yeah.
It becomes a reflection of that love. So nature is a reflection of God's love, and you cannot love God and mistreat His gift, the earth. You cannot love your husband or your boyfriend and burn down his house at the same time, or you can, but then something is spiritually broken within you.
Right, like if you have that, if that's your the way in which you express your love, it might be genuine, but you should still stop.
Well, I mean, if he cheated on you, like in Waiting to Exhale, which I know is what you're referring to, Mir, burning down his house is a profound act of love.
Well, but God in this case is no cheater.
God doesn't cheat on us.
Well, and also
we haven't found aliens yet.
Yeah, to bring it back to like the common home, it's like you wouldn't burn down your common home,
right?
Like
that's true too.
Yeah.
if you
Right.
lived in it as well. That's literally the analogy, is like it's the place we all are. And so we all sort of have this responsibility to be the lover and firefighter.
Right.
I just really love this. I really love this turn of phrase when he says it's in number 11. He says he's talking about Saint Francis of Assisi. It says he communed with all creation, even preaching to the flowers, inviting them to praise the Lord, just as if they were endowed with reason. Just like every single word is so poetic, so beautiful.
Yeah.
Like, I strongly encourage whoever's listening to not listen to this in place of reading this text.
Right.
Read every single word, because it's
There's
so
there's
moving.
a little bit of implied animism for Kevin there.
Absolutely.
That's exactly right.
Deep resonance.
There is another beautiful paragraph here where it talks about our relationship with nature and with other people, and contrast the technological episteme to a more Catholic or humanistic episteme. If we approach nature and the environment without this openness to awe and wonder, if we do no longer speak the language of fraternity and beauty in our relationship with the world, our attitudes will become that of master, consumers, and ruthless exploiters, unable to set a limit on their immediate needs.
Right.
So, like, what is talking about there is like treating both other people and nature as ends and not means, and to treat them as beings that we have relationships with, and not as isolated instances which we can manipulate to our own ends.
Right.
And that's a good stopping point.
Well, there's one.
Yeah,
wait, Chris.
is.
No, I have to pull the bend because there's one banger.
You have to go back to the first page.
No, there's just a banger that he quotes Patriarch Bartholomew, and I'm not going to read the whole thing. Here's Bartholomew says, for human beings to degrade the integrity of the earth by causing capitalism. I just think that is like,
Yeah,
causing capitalism.
There's no way to interpret that except what it says.
Yeah.
All right.
Well,
actually, I have like a couple minutes. Would I be able to really, really briefly make one last point?
of course, man.
Because
it's my friend. Yeah,
he's also pulling a bin.
No, I just I should have brought this up earlier, but there's this book called The Last Christian. Do you know this book by Adolf Holl?
No.
I think he was Austrian Catholic theologian who might have been excommunicated. Basically, this book is a biography of Francis of Assisi, using kind of like a Freudian lens, which won't be everyone's cup of tea, but it's definitely not the schmaltzy Francis, right? But I just wanted to read the very first paragraph because I feel like it summed up. Because I had known this book before reading Laudato Si, and the book begins, about 800 years ago, people in a number of European cities began to feel a peculiar and unheard of desire. They wanted to know what time it was. Of course, there had always been church bells. They summoned the faithful to worship, proclaimed the arrival of death, and warned of fire and approaching enemies. The chimes divided the day into morning, afternoon, and evening. Nobody had a watch. Then in the year 1188, the citizens of Tournai in Belgium got permission from the king to set up a clock in a suitable spot to strike the hours for their pleasure and the city's business. Thus people began to live in a new era. They called it modern times. And then, for one last time, before the forces of progress thundered off on their triumphant path, one man looked into the motivating thrust behind the whole thing and decisively rejected it. Francis of Assisi, the last Christian.
Wow.
Uh,
I like
There-
that.
there's a lot more there, but I just, I don't think Pope Francis is coming from the same place, but I think the overlap of like, this discussion of technology and modernity, this sort of like a clock literally dividing time in the day of like, as like to become more efficient, like workers, or to become this like extractable consuming sort of ideology. And that Francis in this is like the one who goes like, nope. And who like, goes to live with nature and to talk to birds. And I just find that really interesting.
Yeah. That's awesome. Very fitting.
Yeah.
Very fitting.
Рабочие и крестьяне не смогут прожить без нас некому будет установить порядок, определить работу, принудить к труду. Без нас все развалится и государство распадется.